Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're on page 279 of your student journal. And our objective for the day is, today I will plot ordered pairs on a coordinate plane with different scales. Okay, and our key word is scales on this lesson. So our key word is scales. So today I will plot ordered pairs on a coordinate plane with different scales. Okay, so let's look at our vocabulary today. So what this range means on a number line, the least and greatest values labeled. But what our big word today is scales. So scales are on a number line, and we're going to say our x-axis and our y-axis are considered number lines. The value given to each grid line. So instead of showing you here, it'll be better when we see our actual examples. But the scale is going to be the numbers used on the x and the y axes. Something that you're going to see is that the scales don't have to be the same. So you could have a different scale for the y-axis than you have on the x-axis. Okay, so I'm going to get started on mine, and today I actually have 3 problems I'm going to do to show you what this looks like. Here is my first problem, and it says plot and label these points. And I'm going to zoom out a little so you can see all of it. So plot and label these points. So if you notice my points, I have 20, 30, negative 20, 55, 35, negative 40, negative 15, negative 15, and 0, 40. So they're really large numbers. Now if you look at my scale, on this one, my scale is actually the same. My scale on my x-axis are counting by tens. My scale on my y-axis is counting by tens as well. You won't see that on every single one that we do though. So they don't have to match. Okay, so my first one that I'm going to plot is 20, 30. So on my x, I'm going to find a 20. On my y, I'm going to find a 30. And here's my first one. And I might label that A. Okay, then I have negative 20 on my x and 55. Okay, if you notice I don't have a 55 on my y, so 55 is between 50 and 60. It would be right about here. So when those meet, it's going to be right here. It's not going to be right on the points where we've been used to. So we can label that B. I'll put B up here. C is 35 on my x, which will be between 30 and 40, so probably right about there. And then negative 40 is my y, so it'd be down here. So those two will be meeting right here, and we'll call that C. And then we have negative 15 for D. So negative 15 is my x, which would have to be between negative 10 and negative 20. And then again, negative 15 will be between negative 10 and negative 20. So it would meet right about there. That's where our D would go. And then E would be at 0 on my x line and 40 on my y, which would be right about there, or actually exactly there. So again, the scale on these we're counting by tens. Now some of them I actually needed it by 5, so I just had to go in between, and that worked fine. Okay, I'm going to show you another one where we're going to have some rational numbers because we're going to have some fractions involved. And the scale here looks like it's counting by maybe fourths because there's 4 intervals before the 1. Okay, so they want me again to plot these, and again my scale here, instead of being a larger scale, it's smaller, so it looks like it's counting by fourths. So I always like to label my x and y's. So my first one is negative 1, negative 3. So this is negative 1, negative 3 is way down here. Okay, my next one is -1x and 3/4. So 3/4 would be 3 intervals up, not at the 1. So it would be right here. We could call that B. Then we have a -1 and 1/4. So that's past -1. It's 1 past, and that's going to be with a +2, which would be way up here. So we'll call that C. Then we have a 2 positive on our X with a -1 and 3/4. So -1 and 3/4 would be right here. So we have to make those meet right here, and we could call that D. And my final one we'll call E is -2/4, -2/4. So -2/4 would be 2 of the 4 ways there, and negative right here. So that would be E. So again, this scale was very, very small compared to our last one. Okay, the last one I'm going to do with you now is more rational numbers, and now it's decimals. So instead of fractions, we now have decimals. So again, I'm going to always label my X, Y's. And then let's figure out what my scale's by. Because it's not by tenths, because it looks like I'm only going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my scale is not counting by tenths, it's actually counting by 20ths. So it's counting by 0.2s. That's what my scale is. So because this would be 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and 1 whole. So it's counting by 0.2s. Okay, so my first X is -1 and 1.6. So 1.6, this would be 1.2, 1.4, and 1.6 is going to be right there. So those would meet right here, and that's our A. Okay, 1.5, this one's going to be even trickier, because if this is 1, and that's 1.2, and that's 1.4, and that's 1.6, 1.5 has to be right here in the middle of 1 and 2. And then 0.8 would have to be 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8. So those two are going to meet right here. So we could call that B. Okay, then we have -0.5 on our X, and that's going to be right between 0 and 1. So it'd be right there. And +0.6 on my Y. So 2.2, 0.4, 0.6. So it'd be right here would be our C. Okay, our next one is -1.5 on our X. So -1 and -2, -1.5 is going to be right in the middle. And then -1's down here. So those would be meeting right here for D. And then our final one, what we'll call E, is +1 on our X. And then on our Y, it's -1.2. So -1 and -1.2 is right there. And that would be our E. Okay, so let's try a few of these together. We are on page 280, and I'm not going to do all of them with you. I'm just going to do some. So on page 280, we have, they want us to plot these. Now, this is what I was trying to show you. Look at the scale. My Y scale looks like it's counting by halves, because it's a half 1, 1 and a half 2. But then my X scale is counting by tens. So your scales don't have to be the same. So don't think that the scales have to match. Okay, so let's label our X and Y's to help us, and we can label our A, B, C, D, and E. So my first X is 40 positive, and my Y is -5. So it's going to go all the way down here at the bottom, which you barely could see. So it's way down there. Okay, my next one is -25 on my X, which would be between 20 and 30, and +2 on my Y, which would be up here. Okay, then we have -35 on my X, which is between -30 and 40, and -4 on my Y, which goes all the way down here to be C. Okay, then we have on my X -10, and on my Y -1, which would be right here. And then my final one is on my x positive 5, so that's going to be between 0 and 10, and negative 2, which would be down here. Okay, let's look at our next one together. Now we have some fractions. Okay, so on this one the scale matches. The scale is the same. It looks like they're counting by halves. So they're counting by halves. So we have x, y, let's label them. This always helps me plot them correctly, and we can label them A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so my first one is 1/2 positive x and 3.5 positive. So there's our A. Then our x is -2 and positive 2.5. So that would be up here, B. Okay, then we have positive 4 on the x and -1 and 1/2 on the y. So, which would be between -1 and 2. Then we have -1/2 on the x and -1 and 1/2 on the y. So that's going to be between 1 and 2 is D. And then we have 4.5 on our x, which would be 4, so going to be half's going to be between 4 and 5, and then 0 on the y. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, what I want you to continue to do is all of lesson 8's pages, and then go on to lesson 9 and do those as well. Have a great day.